Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman rules Saudi Arabia day to day on behalf of his father, the king. He spoke to CBS Evening news anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell last Tuesday in an interview that aired last night on 60 Minutes. She asked him about the death a year ago of Jamal Khashogghi, something the Crown Prince has never discussed in a television interview.
Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashogghi?
بلا شك لا.
Absolutely not. This was a heinous crime. But I take full responsibility as a leader in Saudi Arabia, especially since it was committed by individuals working for the Saudi government.
What does that mean, that you take responsibility?
When a crime is committed against a Saudi citizen by officials working for the Saudi government, as a leader I must take responsibility. This was a mistake, and I must take all actions to avoid such a thing in the future.
And Norah joins me now from Washington. Norah, this was a remarkable tableau to see the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia sitting down to answer questions from a Western journalist who happens to be a woman, questions that frankly were fascinating to watch his response to. You've interviewed him before, but tell us what was actually different this time as you sat down with him.
Well, Elaine, this was probably one of the toughest interviews I've ever done. It's difficult to sit across from anyone, let alone the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and ask him point blank whether he ordered the murder of a critic and a columnist. You can see in the interview that he does take responsibility for the first time, but he denied that he ordered the killing. That despite a CIA assessment that concluded that the Crown Prince was likely personally targeted Khashoggi and knew about this in advance, perhaps not all the specific details of what happened to him, but that he was targeted by the Crown Prince. And so part of this getting through this interview is because, one, this week marks the one-year anniversary of Jamal Khashoggi's death. That death and the way he was allegedly dismembered and killed, his body never found, shocked the world and raised real questions about the reforms that the Crown Prince has publicly said that he wanted to carry out in terms of modernizing Saudi Arabia, not just the economy, but also relaxing some of the strict societal rules that go on there. And so I think, we had a limited amount of time, but we wanted to ask the very tough questions that the world wanted the answer to, not only about Jamal Khashoggi, but also the bloody war in Yemen, what's happening with Iran. And then, as you'll see more of our interview tonight on the CBS Evening News about not only the role of women in Saudi Arabia, but the crackdown that some female activists had faced when they raised objections about some of the rules in Saudi Arabia. So we'll have more of that on the Evening News.
And the Khashoggi murder and the attacks on the Saudi oil fields have tested the Saudi-U.S. relationship. How do you see this playing out going forward?
Well, that's right. Remember those attacks just a couple weeks ago on Aramco, which is the world's most profitable company. You're talking about producing 5.5% of the world's oil supply, allegedly carried out by Iran. We got those new pictures of 24 drone and cruise missile attacks coming in the early morning hours. I mean, shocked many people, including those who said, how does Saudi Arabia defend itself in the future? So that's why the U.S. is now sending hundreds more troops and some new equipment to help Saudi Arabia. But generally speaking, we're, I think, at a really pivotal point, because Iran, under this administration, has faced tougher new sanctions, and you see Iran essentially lashing out, not only the attack on Aramco, but the attack on the U.S. drone, also some of the stuff that has been happening in the Persian Gulf, and raises the question of whether President Trump will ultimately sit down with Iran's president, Rouhani, in order to craft a new deal that would lift those sanctions and then perhaps have Iran say that they have no nuclear ambitions. So I think we're at a really critical point. And so part of talking to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was also to get his take on what should be done in Iran, and also whether there's going to be a military confrontation. That's what we all care about, right? Whether there's going to be a war in the Middle East, whether it means anything for our men and women who serve in the military. And so I think it was interesting to hear the Crown Prince say that the military option should be the last option, that a diplomatic option is the better of them.
Absolutely. Extraordinarily high stakes here. Norah O'Donnell, thank you very much. We look forward to the rest of the interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.